So I'm gonna be honest, whenever the new year rolls around, I get really anxious about what my first video of the year is going to be, but this year I decided I was going to start the year off by setting the bar really low, by being so very predictable and drawing some hot ladies for my Redrawing My Childhood Characters plus Random Aesthetics series, which I did, but instead of setting the bar low, I accidentally drew two characters that I am obsessed with. I love how both of them turned out, and I'm super excited to show them to you, so let's get into it. As per the part of the series that makes the characters random, I have to spin that wheel. That one's for you Drawfee fans. Get perceived, nerds. Technically, I am spinning 3 wheels because we are rolling for character, aesthetic, and random trait, for which we got Astraea in Art Deco with multiple arms. Oh baby, the scream that I didn't scrumped because I didn't want to startle my partner, and also in general I dislike being loud, but the scream I would have scrumped for this character aesthetic trait combo. In her original drawing, Astraea has fairly light skin with an olive undertone, deep brown curly hair, and a luxurious look about her clothing and posture. She has a satin or silk dress, layered bangles, and is head to toe in purples. I didn't exactly keep her color palette 1-to-1. She went from her winter foundation to her summer foundation. Her curl pattern changes a bit more than I intended it to, and I just take purple out entirely and bring in greens instead, but she is still mad luxurious, I assure you. And here is where I have to break some unfortunate news. I think I was doing a pretty good job of the standard I set for myself, which was keeping most of these characters within the realm of a knight in some sort of armor, shining or not. Some of these are a little more loosely defined as armor. There were some historical and cultural backgrounds that had an effect on some of these designs, but unfortunately, I did not make an Art Deco knight, as easy as that would have been. Like, I already know that that wouldn't have been a difficult thing to do at all with all the golds and geometric shapes available to me. I just wasn't thinking. I have no idea what came over me. I started seeing all these paintings of ladies in suits, and I was just very predictably overcome by the idea of drawing a lady in a well-tailored suit. How can you possibly blame me? So to cover my mistakes, I came up with a little bit of lore. I think at some point in time, Astraea sustained some kind of injury, likely in her leg, which is why she uses a cane. While the injury caused her to fall out of her physically taxing athletic routines, her magic abilities did not waver in the slightest, and she always had a mind for organization and decision making. As her injuries kept her out of the way of action and adventures, it eventually led her to take on a more managerial leadership role, and genuinely, the Celestial Knights had not been nearly as smoothly operated before Astraea assumed command. And I think that really suits her, both in aesthetic and namesake, because as always, we do a little bit of learning about the celestial bodies that all of these characters are named after. Astraea's namesake is an asteroid called 5 Astraea, the designation 5 because she was the 5th known asteroid discovered almost 40 years after the 4th asteroid was discovered. She was actually found by a German post office headmaster named Karl Ludwig Henke, who was an amateur astronomer looking to find the 4th asteroid, but amazingly stumbled upon Astraea instead. Astraea's discovery was incredibly significant. Though she isn't one of the more deeply studied asteroids, it was the study of Astraea that gave us the category asteroid as a type of celestial body. Up until this point, the first 4 discovered asteroids were designated as planets, and finding Astraea led astronomers to the realization that there were many smaller celestial bodies that would need classification as well, and the few that they had found were only the largest among them. Astraea's name comes from the ancient Greek goddess associated with purity, precision, and justice. The goddess Astraea initially lived among the humans, but as people eventually became more evil and corrupt, Astraea decided to leave them, and she moved to live in the stars in the constellation Virgo. Despite being associated with Virgo and not Libra, because of her relation to justice and impartiality, her symbolism often includes a pair of scales, which I think aesthetically a scale ties in pretty well with the overall Art Deco theme we have going on here. Scales have their own balance and geometry to them, and I could just picture Astraea in this incredibly luxurious dark green office with moody lighting and gold accents and a giant walnut or mahogany desk with stacks of papers and elegant fountain pens and a little gold scale. I also think she has bookshelves full of magical artifacts. When she isn't busy with paperwork or strategizing, she's doing her utmost to to uncover or get her hands on the next rare magical artifact. Her dueling cane, cigarette holder, watch, and gemstone monocle are just a few of the items she has acquired over the years, and she is always looking for more. I think what is simultaneously my favorite and least favorite part of this design is the emerald lapels on her waistcoat. I love them in theory. I think they were the correct way to go. I do not regret putting them there, but what I actually wanted to do on them was this fan geometric design, which is one of my favorite shapes of all time to come out of the Art Deco style. I love fan tiles so much, but because I refused to draw my characters facing straight forward for whatever reason, I had a really hard time getting all of those thin curved lines to look right, and so in the interest of maintaining a small semblance of sanity, I instead went for this triangular, I don't know what's going on here. I don't think I can even call it a triangular pattern really. Whatever it is, I don't like it. I don't like how it turned out. Nearly everything else in this design I'm a fan of, but these triangles just don't sit right with me for one reason or another. Also, I almost forgot to draw the chain that connects her monocle to her lapel, but I didn't forget. It would be so embarrassing if someone was drawing and uploading their speed draw and forgot to render part of the drawing, only to figure out after the fact while editing the video that they missed it and to have to go back and fix it in post or just leave it as it is. And this is something I know definitely not because it's something that I have experienced myself in my own lifetime many times. But that brings us to the end of our first drawing of the day, Astraea. Other than that one thing about her lapels I mentioned earlier, I really like this design. I like the details, the accessories, her facial features and color palette. Green is my favorite color of all time, so how could I not like this? But if you think this drawing is a fun one, let's get into the next one. So I thought multi-armed Art Deco queen pin was going to be the thing that made me happiest this week, and I was terrified of anything else that I was going to roll when I got Ceres with a steampunk aesthetic as a cyborg. I mean, could it be more perfect? When I tell you I was fully immersed in this drawing, you have no idea. I spent 7 hours on this bad boy. You are seeing 7 hours of work smushed down into 5.5 minutes, and you know what? Honestly, it would have been way over 7 hours if I didn't just tell myself I had to call it at a certain point because I needed to have enough time to actually edit and upload the video, and I still didn't have enough time. I really love doing sketches, and while I do clearly have a lot of art that is colored in with crayons or colored pencils from my Redrawing childhood character series as a whole, I think a large majority of my art growing up was done with just a regular 2B standardized test pencil, or if we were getting real fancy, maybe a mechanical pencil, and sometimes on nice drawing or printer paper, but most often in the margins of notebooks or on the back of bulletins and pamphlets. And working on a fresh sketch is always my favorite part of the process. It just really appeals to what I have always loved about drawing. It's the first time in the art process where I get to solidify shapes and composition balance. I get to indicate facial features. Even the smallest change to an eyebrow or jawline can change everything. And I got to spend a lot more time on this sketch than I feel like I usually allow myself for sketches, because it also took a bit more care and detail for thinking of how the mechanical constructions of her arms were going to work, where do hydraulics go, where are joints going to be needed, things like that. Ceres is not a very tall or large person. I know she looks like she's taking up a ton of space in the canvas while other characters don't tend to do that, but I promise when you see her next to the lineup of Celestials at the end of the video, you will see how her proportions match up. But I love giving a smaller person a disproportionately large weapon, whether that's to give the twig of an anime girl a great sword because you can, or if it's, of course, the dwarf gets a warhammer that's twice his size. That's how it's supposed to be. I love that. I love that trope so much, and I do have an excuse this time. Ceres is part cyborg, so her arms don't have the same limits that human arms do. She is incredibly strong, lifting these 2 giant wide-bladed swords with hooked ends, and the swords also aren't just plain swords. Nay, that would not nearly be steampunk enough. Of course they have to have some sort of ability, like the ability to get really hot without melting, to add an additional 1d6 fire damage along alongside your 2d6 greatsword damage. I was originally going to give her steam-powered gauntlets because that's so steampunk of all time, but I felt like she was already pretty arcane coded in a lot of ways already. I didn't finish watching Arcane too long ago, but I didn't want it to be so obvious that the art of Arcane lives in my head rent-free. Also, I know Ceres is not strictly wearing armor. She has some shin guards and that's about it, but in my defense, it's less that she needs armor and more that she is armor. She's covered from pretty much neck to toe. You have no idea what percentage of her is just metal and wiring. And speaking of metal and wiring, rendering this gave me strong flashbacks to the time I drew Rusty Blitzcrank. I laugh on the outside about that, but on the inside, I cry a lot. So you might be wondering about the little backward C shape on her arm or the little Venus symbol with the break in the circle on her emblem tag thing. These are actually outdated but real symbols that have been used to designate Ceres as a celestial body. And funnily enough, I have to specify celestial body because in 2006, the same year that Pluto downgraded from planet to dwarf planet, Ceres was upgraded from asteroid to dwarf planet. Sort of. Some modern sources designate her as dwarf planet, some say asteroid, and sometimes they say both. But either way, Ceres was the very first celestial body discovered in the asteroid belt, and she was originally named as a planet, a full-sized planet, before the discovery of Astraea. Long before we realized the asteroid belt existed, some astronomers looked at the orbits and distance between Mars and Jupiter and came to the conclusion that mathematically something was missing. This consequently led to a lot of disagreement, and this question plagued astronomers for a while until Italian priest and astronomer Giuseppe Piazzi was searching for a specific star and found instead something else, something that looked like a star but moved like a comet except quite a bit slower. Piazzi tracked this celestial body and then reported his findings, saying, "Its movement is so slow and rather uniform, it has occurred to me several times that it might be something better than a comet." Ironically, when he reported it, it had begun to take a path that put it too close to the sun's glare, so the astronomers of that time were not able to observe it. So it was actually lost temporarily, not able to be retracked until nearly a year later, where it was finally found and officially named by Piazzi as Ceres Ferdinandea, after the Roman goddess of agriculture and the, at the time, king of Sicily. And since then, a lot of studies have been and are being done regarding Ceres and her classification. I guess we'll just have to see how that shakes out. But for now, here is our steampunk cyborg girl, Ceres. I love this design. Steampunk is an aesthetic that is a little bit near and dear to my heart. It is one of the first aesthetics that caught my interest as a young teenager, and honestly, watching people making steampunk props was very much a gateway to cosplay for me. I still love a good industrial look. I love a nice warm brown, and even after all this, I still love rendering metal. But what a couple of cutie patooties. Not only are they so cool as standalone characters, honestly, Ceres and Astraea probably have some really fun interactions together. I can picture Ceres being headstrong and quick to act, while Astraea is more of a plotter and schemer. Maybe a little bit of tension, maybe some conflict, and maybe some unlikely friendships. But what are these two without the rest of the group? I adore looking at them all. They're so shiny and colorful and different in all of their own ways. I probably should not have gone so hard for my first video of the year. I should have known better than to work in my favorite genre of hot lady. And also, I spent so much time talking about them that I gave absolutely no insight into my plans for this upcoming year. But then again, I do say that like I have a ton of plans instead of just the scraps of what I didn't finish last year. But I'm still going to do them all, or at the very least do my best at doing them all. But I guess, who knows? Not me.